Fake homeowner association cops crushed my pregnant wife's arm. I emptied the Glock 19 before they blinked. Armed imposters, posing as homeowner association officers, stormed onto Zach Harper's property and crushed his pregnant wife Emma's arm right in front of him. They barked fake laws, acted with authority they did not have, and thought fear would let them get away with anything. But Zach was not the kind of man to back down. He stood between them and his family, and made a choice that changed everything. But just wait until you see how this confrontation took a shocking turn, and why justice, in the end, came out on top. Zach Harper turned slowly off the main road, his blinker ticking like a heartbeat, as the old Ford F-150 rolled up the short gravel path to his home. Afternoon light filtered through the windshield, catching the fine layer of dust on the dash. The truck rumbled low, steady, familiar, safe. Inside, the scent of aged leather filled the cabin, but beneath it lingered something sweeter, strawberry bubblegum, Emma's signature. A pink piece still stuck beside the air vent, left behind on their morning drive. Zach glanced at it and smiled, a soft, quiet moment. The kind that said we are okay. He parked, engine idling for a beat, before cutting it off. The German shepherd Bruno barked twice from the porch, then fell silent. Emma was there too, seated on the edge of the steps, one hand resting over her pregnant belly, the other wrapped around the dog's collar, trying to keep him from lunging at the Amazon box lying crooked near the door. 8 months along and still managing everything like a general, she looked tired but calm. "I'm just going in for a sec," Zach called out, grabbing his phone and swinging the door shut. "And tell the delivery guy, if he leaves another box out in the heat, I am sending it back to Seattle." Emma rolled her eyes, half laughing, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Bruno growled again, uneasy. Zach stepped onto the walkway. 2 steps in. That is all it took. A voice tore through the stillness. "Hey, who are you?" It was not a neighbor's voice. It was not curious. It was forceful, sharp, commanding. Zach spun around just in time to see a beat-up blue Crown Victoria swerve toward the curb and stop with a screech. No plates, no markings, just a single yellow light blinking on the roof like a cheap toy. His chest tightened. 2 men jumped out, uniforms but not real ones, no patches, no name tags, no shields. One had a stick in his hand, wrapped crudely in black tape. The other wore a Velcro badge that said Homeowner Association Enforcement. Zach's blood went cold. The skinny one pointed toward the house. "Get back inside now, you are violating the neighborhood noise ordinance, that dog is not leashed." Emma stood up, confused, instinctively shielding her belly. Bruno snarled, hackles rising. Zach stepped between them, voice hard. "Who the hell are you people?" Neither man answered. The one with the baton did not hesitate. He moved fast, reached out and grabbed Emma by the arm. Her scream was sharp, short, muffled only by shock. There was a crack, a sound Zach would never forget, like breaking a branch in slow motion. Emma's arm twisted the wrong way, her body bent, one knee hitting the porch, other hand gripping her side. She gasped, eyes wide and wild. Bruno exploded with a howl. Time froze. The sky lost its color, everything muted, as if someone pulled the sound from the world and left only the high-pitched ring of panic. Zach's heart did not pound. It stopped. He stared, unblinking, as if his mind could not catch up to what his eyes just saw. They heard her. They actually heard her. Not neighbors, not security, not anyone official. This was no inspection, no misunderstanding, no warning about trash cans or paint colors. This was an attack, and it was happening right on his porch. To the woman he loved, the child they were weeks from meeting, the home he had built with bare hands, in late nights and overtime hours. Zach's foot shifted. He did not even realize he was moving. His jaw clenched. The air in his lungs burned like fire, and somewhere deep in his chest something cracked open. There were no words for what was coming, only decisions. Zach's hand went to his back pocket in a single fluid motion. The phone was warm from the sun, screen already open, camera app halfway loaded. His fingers moved faster than his thoughts, instinct not decision. He raised the phone to snap a photo of the imposters. That is when the baton came down. Not with full force, just enough to sting, just enough to send the phone flying. The tape would hit Zach's wrist with a dry thud, and his phone spun through the air before vanishing into the overgrown hedge at the edge of their yard. The man did not even blink. "One more move and you are under arrest," he barked, pointing the tip of the baton like a finger. Violation of Section 38B, unauthorized recording of a homeowner association enforcement officer. Zach stared at him, stunned. Section 38B, that was not real. That was not even close to a valid citation. The man's voice carried a twisted sort of confidence, loud, certain, like he believed if he said it forcefully enough, it would be real. It was theater, and the costume did not even fit right. Emma was still frozen on the porch, her breath ragged. Her right hand cradled her injured arm, her shoulders curled inward. Tears were streaming silently down her face, but she did not make a sound. Zach could see the way her stomach trembled, their son Aiden moving, reacting, kicking against the pain his mother could not hide. Zach's chest tightened, his hands curled into fists. "You do not get to touch my wife," he growled, each word like stone dragged across concrete. "This is private property. You do not live here, you do not work here, you do not belong here." He took a step forward. The second man, the taller one with the plastic badge, did not back away. Instead, he grabbed Zach by the collar, pulling him in just close enough for their foreheads to almost touch. "You failed to submit your lawn treatment form on time," he hissed, lips barely moving, "and we have no record of mailbox replacement approval." Zach blinked. "What? You are out of compliance, that gives us authority to act." The words came at him like bullets, clipped, official sounding, absurd. But they said them like gospel, like it was written in some secret suburban scripture that gave them divine power, mailbox approval, lawn treatment forms. And yet his wife's arm was broken, his phone was gone, his dog was snarling on a leash, and two grown men, complete strangers, were on his porch pretending to govern his life. That is when it hit him. It was not just these two. It was bigger. It was the homeowner association that let this happen, the faceless organization that had been sending letters every week, harassing them over grass height and trash bins, dictating what kind of blinds they could hang in their own windows. It was the entire warped structure that allowed people like this to pretend they held authority. They fed off fear, compliance, silence. And now, that system had crawled out of the mailbox and onto his porch. It had a baton, it had no name tag, and it had just broken his pregnant wife's arm. Zach did not feel confusion anymore. Not shock either. What filled his chest now was not simple rage. It was deeper than that. It was bitter cold, a dark, pulsing hatred that pushed everything else out of the way. Not just toward these two men, but toward the whole lie. The illusion of order, the fake rules, the threats disguised as regulations. He looked at Emma, still crying, still silent, and in that moment, Zach Harper knew this was not about code violations. This was about power, and he was done letting anyone else have it. The taller of the two imposters moved first. Zach's eyes locked on him, every muscle in his body coiled like a wire pulled too tight. The man popped open the battered trunk of the Crown Victoria, digging around in the cluttered mess inside. For a second, Zach hoped, it might be over. Maybe they realized they had gone too far. Maybe they would leave. But no, the man straightened up, plastic zip ties in one hand, a cheap cracked walkie-talkie in the other. It was not even a real radio, just an old toy someone might find at the flea market, worn and scratched, barely holding together. No working microphone, no backup support, no dash cams mounted on their car, no official forms, no backup badges, nothing. Nothing but arrogance. They thought fear was enough, thought the sight of plastic cuffs and a few barked orders would bring him to his knees. But they had made a fatal mistake. The thinner one approached, shoulders back, baton swinging lightly from his wrist like he had all the time in the world. "You are under arrest for non-compliance and disrespect toward a homeowner association enforcement officer," he said, voice low, curling the words like smoke. "Get down on your knees." His tone was not angry, it was not even threatening, it was patronizing, the way someone talks to a dog they think will roll over if kicked enough times. Zach did not move. Not right away. He slowly lifted his hands halfway, palms forward, not in surrender, in calculation. Every second felt stretched thin, humming with the invisible weight of what he was about to do. He spoke, and his voice was steady, quiet, almost too quiet to hear over the pounding of blood in his ears. "You broke her arm," he said, looking straight into the man's eyes. "She is carrying my son. You do not even care who we are, do you?" A flicker crossed the fake officer's face. Not fear, not shame, amusement. The man smirked, a crooked, lazy grin that said everything, that said he thought this was funny, that he thought none of it mattered. That was it. That was the exact moment when the world split clean in two, before and after. There would be no talking, no appeals, no waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Zach's hands moved. Not fast, not reckless, calm, methodical. His right hand slipped inside his jacket, fingers wrapping around the familiar shape resting against his ribs, cool steel, heavy, comforting, real. Glock 19. He had not planned on needing it today. It was for long drives, remote roads, gas stations at night, a habit formed after reading too many headlines about people who did not make it home because they believed nothing bad would happen. Today was not a drive. Today was not a headline. Today was his house, his wife, his unborn son. The pistol slid free, natural as breathing. His fingers stayed outside the trigger guard, disciplined, even though every nerve screamed for release. He did not point it yet. He did not have to. The weight of it shifted the air around him, and for the first time, the fake officers hesitated, tiny, almost invisible. But Zach saw it, saw the recognition, the flicker of doubt. But he did not want revenge. He did not want blood. He wanted them to know that no matter what badge they printed out, no matter what uniform they stitched together, no matter how many fake laws they shouted, here, on this ground, in this home, they had no authority. Only one authority stood here now, and it was armed. It all unfolded in less than a heartbeat. Zach moved first, instincts honed not by training but by the simple, unbreakable truth that no one was going to hurt his family while he still stood. He threw his body in front of Emma, shielding her, pulling her down behind him, as the air thickened, charged with raw electricity. The Glock 19 came up in a single smooth motion, steady as bedrock. The first shot cracked through the afternoon air, sharp, clean, a warning, fired straight up into the cloudless sky, a command written in thunder. So, the imposters flinched, frozen for a split second in pure shock. Zach did not wait. The second shot drilled into the thigh of the man with the duct tape baton. The impact knocked him sideways, leg buckling as he cried out, the baton clattering uselessly against the driveway. The third shot snapped into the shoulder of the one with the fake badge. He spun back, staggering, the cheap plastic flashing against the sunlight as he fell. They did not posture anymore, did not shout legal threats, did not talk about lawn ordinances. They screamed, stumbling, dragging themselves toward their battered Crown Victoria, panic written all over their faces. Down Emma, Zach roared over his shoulder, the command slicing through the chaos. Bruno, faithful and furious, lunged forward in a blur of teeth and muscle, clamping down on one of the imposter's legs. The man screamed, higher, wilder, trying to kick the dog off. But Bruno only dug in harder, a growl rumbling low and deep from his chest. Zach's hands stayed firm on the Glock. His arms did not shake. His heartbeat did not skip. His mind was clearer than it had ever been. He had not fired to kill. He had not fired to maim. He fired to deliver a message, one written and lead in finality. This is where you end. Right here. Right now. Each squeeze of the trigger was not about rage. It was not revenge. It was judgment. The magazine emptied with it. Metallic click, sharp and final. Zach lowered the Glock slightly, stepping forward, boots crunching across the gravel. He moved without rush, without fear, each stride deliberate, as the two men writhed in the grass, clutching at their wounds, gasping and babbling incoherent radio codes like children pretending to be soldiers. Code 97 Alpha, one of them wailed toward the broken radio still clutched in his trembling hand. Request assistance. There was no assistance coming. There were no backup officers, no shield, no badge, no authority, only consequences. Zach stood over them, the afternoon sun blazing behind him, casting a long shadow across the men who minutes ago thought fear would win them the day. They were wrong. The anger that had once boiled inside him had cooled, transformed into something colder, heavier, a deep, unshakable satisfaction. He was not smiling. There was no joy in this, no triumph in violence, only the solemn certainty that he had protected what mattered most. Zach looked down at the two broken men and spoke, not loudly, not with anger, calm, icy, every word deliberate, etched into the moment like stone. "My wife is pregnant," he said, "and you will not see another day where you think you can hurt someone like this again." Neither man answered. There was only the sound of Bruno's low growl and the distant wail of sirens beginning to cut through the air. Justice was not coming. It was already here. Emma lay stretched across the grass, her body curled protectively around her swollen belly. The makeshift tourniquet, an old sun-bleached t-shirt Zach had yanked from the truck bed, was tied tightly around her arm just above the break. Her face was pale, almost translucent, under the harsh midday sun. But her eyes were anything but weak. They burned, not with fear, with pain, with fury, and with something far more dangerous than either, resolve. She was not crying. There were tears on her cheeks, yes, but they had fallen without sound, without surrender. Her breaths came short and sharp, each one forced out as if she were fighting to push the fire from her lungs. Zach knelt beside her, his hands braced lightly on her shoulders, careful, deliberate, treating her like something precious and breakable. The weight of the Glock was still heavy at his side, but his focus was only on her now, her trembling hands, the life growing inside her, the strength she did not even know she was showing. He knew the line he was standing on. He could feel it under his boots, thin as a wire stretched to snapping. If he crumbled now, if he lost control, everything would spiral, everything would be taken from them. Not yet. Not here. He tightened his grip, steadying her, steadying himself. Then through the thick metallic taste of adrenaline he heard it, the low growl of Bruno at the gate, alerting him before he even saw the flashing lights. The first wail of sirens broke through the charged air, rising over the quiet chaos of the yard. Help was coming. Or at least something claiming to be help. Zach's mind spun through possibilities. Maybe a neighbor had called. Maybe the imposters had managed to press something on their fake radio. Maybe none of it mattered now. Across the lawn, one of the so-called enforcers was dragging himself toward the car, blood smearing the grass behind him. His hand reached out, stretching toward the broken walkie-talkie lying useless in the dirt. Bruno was faster. The big shepherd lunged forward with a low warning growl that needed no translation. His teeth snapped an inch from the man's fingers, freezing him in place. The man whimpered, tucking his hand to his chest like a scolded child. Zach exhaled slowly. Not today. Not again. Emma's fingers brushed against his, weak but determined. Her voice was a whisper, raspy, strained, but unbreakable. "Tell them the truth," she said. "Do not hide." It was self-defense. Zach looked at her, memorizing the fire in her battered face. He nodded once, but deep inside he already knew. He would not tell them everything. He would tell what mattered, protect what mattered. And if they dared question it, if they dared try to twist it, he was ready for that too. He shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over Emma's shoulders, shielding her from the sun, from the sight of the imposters, from whatever was coming next. The Tahoe swung around the corner, tires crunching over the gravel, black and white paint flashing in the light. Real police this time. The uniformed officers spilled out of the vehicle with their hands on their belts, voices commanding but not frantic. For the first time that morning, Zach felt something stir beneath the layers of anger and fear. Relief. Not complete. Not total. But enough. Because finally someone in a real uniform had shown up who was not here to hurt them. Maybe, just maybe, this part of the nightmare was over. Drop the weapon. Face down. Hands where we can see them. The commands came in rapid fire from 3 voices, sharp and overlapping. Sirens still echoed behind them, fading now into the background, as the officers approached in practiced formation, weapons trained forward with rigid precision. Zach did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not so much as flinch. He bent down slowly, deliberately, and placed the Glock on the gravel beside him. The weight of it left his hand with a soft thud, but his finger stayed open in the air, his palms spread wide in surrender. He took a single step backward and lifted his hands higher. No sudden movements, no resistance, nothing threatening. He knew how this looked: a man with a gun, 2 men on the ground, a woman injured. But he also knew the truth. Even surrounded, even with tension thick in the air, Zach did not blink. He met their eyes one by one, his voice low but steady. "They are not officers," he said, every word wrapped in gravel and exhaustion. "No warrant, no badges, they came onto my property and attacked my wife. Look at her arm." One of the officers, younger, light hair, fast eyes, moved to Emma. She had not spoken since the sirens arrived, but her face told the story. Pale, sweating, lips drawn tight with pain. Her arm lay limp against her belly, the makeshift tourniquet dark with pressure. The second officer reached for Zach's wrists, producing a pair of handcuffs. Standard procedure. Zach did not resist. But when the metal locked around his skin, something in him snapped loose. Not rage, but something louder than silence. "She is pregnant," he barked. They crushed her arm. "You think I was supposed to watch that and do nothing? You think that is how this works?" The officers hesitated. Their training said one thing, their eyes said another. Silence fell for a moment, long enough for the dust to settle on the gravel, for Bruno to stop growling and simply watch. Then a voice crackled through the radio on the sergeant's shoulder. "Dispatch to Unit 3, confirmation just came through. Those 2 men are not affiliated with any homeowner association security. One is wanted out of Douglas County, the other is tied to an extortion case in Montgomery, both flagged." The officer holding Zach's wrists froze. The cuffs stayed on for 3 more seconds, then carefully, almost apologetically, he reached back and unclicked the restraints. A soft clink of metal hitting the ground. "Mr. Harper," the officer said, his voice lower now. "We are sorry, we did not know." Zach did not answer at first. His jaw was tight, his breath shallow. The heat of adrenaline had left him, and in its place was something heavier, something almost hollow. Not defeat, not regret, just weight. He crouched beside Emma, brushing the hair from her forehead and taking her uninjured hand in his. Her grip was weak, but it was there. That was enough. He looked up, meeting the officer's eyes without anger, just clarity. "I just wanted to protect my family," he said quietly, "and I would do it again." He was not ashamed. He was not afraid. He had done what any man would do and should do when law failed and danger came dressed in authority. And now, finally, the truth was no longer his burden alone. It was out in the open. 3 weeks later, Zach Harper stood inside a courtroom that smelled of old wood, cold air, and consequence. He was not on trial. He was the one they turned to now, the key witness, the man who refused to let fear dictate the outcome of that morning. At the opposite end of the room sat the 2 men who had once believed they could impersonate power. They were not wearing black polos this time. No cheap badges, no duct tape batons, only county-issued jumpsuits and steel cuffs binding their wrists to the table. They looked small now, shrunk down by the weight of process, of truth catching up to performance. The judge, a woman with a spine made of ice and gaze like a scalpel, studied them as if they were gum stuck to the edge of her bench. Not rage, not disgust, something sharper, contempt. Their lawyer stood between them, sweating under fluorescent lights, trying to thread a narrative through a needle that would not hold. He claimed confusion, misunderstanding, that his clients believed they were operating under delegated neighborhood authority, that they thought they were protecting property values, volunteers. That was the word he leaned on, as if volunteerism absolved criminality. But the evidence said otherwise. Footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera showed everything. The approach, the shouting, the moment Emma's arm was taken and twisted. The audio caught her cry, the sound of bone, the scuffle, the voice trying to recite fake homeowner association codes while dragging a pregnant woman from her own porch. The emergency room report confirmed what the video did not need to explain. A clean break, soft tissue damage, stress on the pregnancy, fingerprints matched the fake baton. One of the men had a prior incident flagged in another county involving threats over imaginary fees. The pieces fit too precisely, too intentionally. The prosecutor did not have to raise their voice. They moved through the facts like a surgeon. Clean cuts, no drama, assault, trespassing, aggravated battery, and most damning of all, impersonating a public officer. When the judge finally spoke, the room held its breath. Her voice was calm, clear, and unyielding. The defendants are found guilty on all charges. No gasps, no outbursts, just silence thick with consequence. Zach did not smile. He did not shift in his seat, did not raise his fists. He only reached out, found Emma's hand, the one not wrapped in soft medical fabric, and held it tightly. Her other hand rested on her round stomach beneath a winter sweater. Their son was due any day now. Justice for him was not about revenge. It was not about watching someone get dragged away. It was about safety, about drawing a clear line in the sand and proving finally that people in uniforms without names could not scare neighborhoods under the excuse of rules. It was not about locking doors tighter. It was about making sure no one ever dared knock again with fake power and real hate. That feeling, quiet, earned, heavy, settled over him like protection. They were not just free. They were safe now for real. 2 months after the event, Joshua Harper came into the world on a cold morning covered in white. The snowfall had started before sunrise, covering the neighborhood in a soft, clean layer of peace. Every branch shined, every rooftop quiet in stillness. Inside the house, the warmth of a fire glowed against the stone wall, casting long orange shadows across the walls. Bruno slept deeply in his usual spot near the flames, his body curled into comfort, his breathing deep and steady. Zach stood at the window, holding his newborn son in his arms. The world outside was quiet, but inside, laughter. Real laughter. Emma, wrapped in a thick sweater and holding a warm mug, laughed like someone who had remembered what it felt like to breathe without pain. Her eyes shined with tiredness and joy, watching the tiny baby in Zach's arms with the kind of love that needed no words. Joshua slept quietly, held against his father's chest. His tiny hands were curled into fists, his face soft and calm. Zach held him a little tighter, not out of fear, but wonder. And for the first time since that terrible morning, Zach let himself feel something he had not allowed before. Not pride in what he had done, but in what he had refused to become. He had not given up to fear. He had not lost control. He had not become the very thing he stood against. He had acted, protected, chosen strength with control, resistance without anger. He had not needed a court to tell him he was right. He had known it the moment he stepped between his wife and danger, before Joshua had taken his first breath, before his name was ever written on a birth certificate. That was the moment he became a father. That was the moment the line was drawn. This home, this peace, this child, they were the result of a decision to stand when others break, to guard when others wait. Zach turned from the window and walked slowly back toward the fire. Emma reached out and touched Joshua's head gently, her eyes wet again, but this time from something whole. Zach looked down at his son, leaned close, and whispered in a voice firm and quiet. Never let them tell you who you are allowed to be, even if they wear a uniform. He meant it because uniforms lie. Badges can be printed. But truth is what you build with actions. The justice system had done its part. Official decisions were made, names entered into records, punishments handed down. But Zach knew that real justice was not born in courtrooms or speeches. It lived here, in the home he protected, in the woman who smiled again, in the child who slept without fear. Justice lived in a man who became a protector. And that is what people remember. That is why stories like his are told, watched, shared. Not for the sound of sirens, not for the flash of a final decision, but for the quiet moment after, when everything could have been lost and was not. Because someone stood up. Because someone said enough and meant